be observing the strict rules around social distancing. We're asking businesses to adapt to what is not a usual set of circumstances. They must be sustainable because they will run for, we believe, at least 6 months. At least 6 months.
At least 6 months. 6 months.
And we want to be able to get everybody through. So we are seeking their support. We will have more to say about commercial tenancies in the days ahead. The treasurers of all the states and territories, led by Josh Frydenberg as the federal treasurer, have been working very hard on this. We'll be engaging with business and landlords and banks over the next couple of days to seek to get even stronger provisions in place so they can all sit down.
There's nothing stopping anyone sitting down. It means everyone's going to have to. The government is also will be doing that too.
I'm going to pass you over to Professor Kelly and Murphy. Sorry, we gave him a day off yesterday, which he thoroughly deserved. And so thank you very much, Brendon.
Thanks, Prime Minister. So I'm going to start tonight just by putting a little bit of coronavirus in Australia and give you an outbreak of 3,978 cases at the moment. Much less than perhaps some people might have predicted some time ago without mitigation. I should say at the outset that we are not Italy, we are not the United States, we are not Spain. We have one of the highest rates of testing per head of population in the world and one of the lowest positive test rates. Unfortunately, Italy, Iran and even the US, they probably had much larger outbreaks.
They probably had much larger outbreaks.
We feel reasonably confident that we are detecting a significant majority of the cases in Australia. That means that we can get on top of cases when they're detected. There are 5,000 or more public health workers in our states and territory public health units. I would like to give them a positive case to isolate in the community. If we can keep our numbers at a level where we can continue to isolate, we can really bring about good suppression. As the Prime Minister has said, we've had a somewhat slowing of the growth in the epidemiology curve, but it's not enough. We have to slow it further.
We have to slow it further.
And we have to stop the thing that's worrying us most, which is community. And that is of concern, particularly in Sydney and to a lesser extent in Melbourne and southeast Queensland. There are tiny pockets of it in other states. Those things do worry us.
Because if you have the community, they can be much harder to control.
Because if you have the community, they can be much harder to control.
But because we are not sure that these measures that we put in place will take the sufficient effect to bring the community right down,
That's why these additional measures are recommended by the National Cabinet tonight. Essentially, all is being talked about is what we've been saying all week.
We have to change the way we as people interact with each other. It's very simple. We have to change people. 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 We need to all stay home. Stay home. This is radical. Home should be in the home. This is radical. Radical. And the vast majority of Australians have done the right thing. We've seen huge evidence of that, but we've also seen some very silly behaviour, particularly outdoors and sometimes indoors. And that's why we feel that it's really important that every Australian does the radical thing, because the science shows that you need more than 90% of the population to be doing it all of the time. So please continue to do what you're doing, continue to follow these rules, and hopefully these early signs of flattening will mean that we can keep going and getting the rate of increase.
To isolate the community. to isolate every day. Thanks, Prime Minister.
Radical.
Just if I can clarify the
Yes,
issue
Sam.
of having a group of two people, I
Yep.
assume that parents can still take their children to the park. Does the two-person rule now apply to weddings or funerals, or do the old numbers apply?
Sure.
And yesterday we saw the Victorian Chief Medical Officer say that the public behaviour in some cases was, to use his word, crap, and that if it didn't change, we were on track to have 100,000 COVID-19 cases within 3 weeks. Do you agree with that prediction?
Well, I'll deal with the first issues first. It's your household. So your household can be together inside your home, outside your home. Outside of your household, if you were out, Sam, just on the street today, you could be there with everyone who's in your household. But if you weren't with the members of your household, you could be there with one other person maximum.
Okay. So that's what the rule is. Radical.
In terms of the weddings and funerals, we believe the arrangements we have for those under those circumstances can remain as they have been. For funerals and for weddings, that was funerals at 10 and weddings at 5. Compassionate.
Radical.
In relation to the other matter, well, I'll refer to Dr. Murphy.
So I think Dr. Sutton is
Totally irresponsible.
But I think what he's saying is if we have a big community...
And we lost control.
Now, we have no intention of getting in that situation, which is why we're enforcing these measures. But at the moment, it is still a precarious position. If people don't take this seriously and we get big communities, they will be very hard to control. I'm not going to go into any particular number modelling. I think that's all speculative, but I think his point is absolutely
Radical.
that
Every single Australian needs community.
in the US even at the moment.
Prime Minister, if people over 70 should stay home, what's your advice on how they should get groceries, medicines, anything else they need?
Well, that's why we've been upping our investment, and as have states and territories as well, in a lot of those home-based services for elderly residents. And also tonight, as I said, there is a registration feature, which I'm sure and I would hope that friends and family of those who are in that situation would be able to register.
And that also gives us an ability to know where people are. And that also gives us an ability to know where people are.
Radical.
What this means is we've got to help each other at the end of the day. So what we're encouraging elderly residents to do is to stay home, and should they need support, then I'm sure they can get support through their community or others, and I'm sure they could even ring their local MP, and I'm sure their local MP and would want to help them in any way they would want to help them in any way they could at either a state or a federal level, because I've seen that already happening through many of our... It is an advice that we're putting in place for their protection. It is not the medical advice that older Australians would be to do that. Yeah, Michelle?
The two-person rule applies presumably inside as well as outside, right?
Correct, like in a shopping centre as opposed to in a park.
So what is the rationale in that case for keeping shopping centres apart from food shops open?
Well, what we've said today is you should be only going out to shop for things that you actually need, and you should be doing it on a regular basis. I'll give you an example.
Our kids are at home now, as are most kids.
And Jenny went out yesterday and bought them a whole bunch of jigsaw puzzles. I can assure you over the next few months we're going to consider those jigsaw puzzles
Absolutely essential.
It's important that parents and families and households can get the things that they need
To completely change the way they're going to live.
for the next 6 months at least. For the next 6 months at least.
For the next 6 months at least.
And so
what we've done is sought to be practical about these issues. I mean, people are buying sporting equipment at the moment, gym mats and things like that, so they can exercise at home. Now, I don't think it's practical.
High-end fashion and these types of things, and that's why you've already seen a lot of those types of retail businesses already closed, because people aren't doing that. And so, Michelle, what we've said is here in this very room, observing those social distancing and other important principles in a learning environment as much as it would to be instructive, to be a guide, but on this two-person rule, and particularly on the 10, I mean, already from memory in South Australia, an on-spot fine of $1,000 if you violate that rule in South Australia. So they're not mucking around. They're very, very serious.
Radical.
And it's being done with the full knowledge and discussion of the National Cabinet. Pardon? They are all moving to the strong advice on 2. Some states and territories will move to an enforcement capability around that too. Others will remain at the other level. But the rule, the guidance, the strong advice is don't gather together in groups. That's the simple way of putting it. Just don't do it. It's not helpful. It actually creates the risk. And when you're going out for shopping, you should be going for just stuff you need and do it and get home. It's not a time for browsing. It's not a time for catching up with friends or bumping into people and having a long conversation and maybe drawing a few other friends across.
To catch up and on how it's all going? No. You can't do that anymore. No. That's what we have to stop doing.
From now. Yeah. Tom.
Prime Minister, just wanted to ask about this cluster of cases, I think 30 or so in the Barossa Valley. There's sort of 3 or 4 towns there. I think there's a bit of localised restrictions going on put in by the state government, but you mentioned a week or so ago that there might be a sort of a localised shutdown action plan that you were coming up with. Is there a case to do that here? Have you gone any further on that plan?
Well, where there's localised actions, and Dr Murphy might want to speak on this as well, they will be handled by the state jurisdictions themselves. And they can take whatever further actions they think are necessary, then understanding what they are and the measures you can put in place around those villages. I mean, many of us may have visited them, and you can set up cordons around those sorts of places and stop people coming in and out. In fact, we're already doing that with large numbers of remote communities around the country right now. And so there is, I think, is enough guidance and instruction to the states and territories to handle those matters when they present. But Brendon?
So I think the important thing is to be able to
Isolate everybody.
And if you have a situation where there is a largish community, then you might put in some localised restrictions. I'm not briefed on the details of those cases in the Barossa, but that is a weapon we always hold in reserve. That is a weapon we always hold in reserve. That if you have a very localised but growing community, one of the mechanisms to stop that spreading is to put localised
restrictions of movement.
Brett, and then I'm going to have to call it because
I have another meeting to go to on.
One of the big anxieties for people is just getting the basics. People still unable to buy toilet paper, hand sanitizer. We've been promised that those supply chains will normalise. That hasn't happened. When will that happen? That's one of the reasons people are leaving their houses quite a lot, is to try and get the basics that they can't. And just secondly, on Australians who are overseas, Labor says that the government should have acted more quickly to get charter flights in place. It's now too late. I don't believe the Foreign Minister has had a press conference since March 6. Where is Marise Payne, and could she be doing more to help those Australians?
Well, I mentioned some weeks ago, it was less than 2 weeks ago, that Marise Payne went into self-isolation after she returned from an overseas visit. So that would explain why you're not seeing her at press conferences. I think that's entirely reasonable. Look, I'm not going to get drawn into the commentary on...
Honestly, I'm too focused.
I don't intend to get into a political commentary about these issues. I'm just
not interested in the politics. Thank you very much. No, I have to go. I'm sorry, I've got to cut. Radical.